They told me I didn't belong, not smart enough, not family enough, not good enough. But guess what? Now, when their world falls apart, my phone rings first. For years, I was the outsider, the black sheep, the one left out of family photos, inside jokes, big decisions. They made sure I knew my place until life flipped the script. See, when you're forced to stand alone, you learn to stand stronger. And one day, without warning, the people who ignored you suddenly need you, not for love, not for connection, but because you're the only one who can fix what they broke. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about power, the kind you earn when no one's watching. If you've ever been the odd one out, hit like. If you've ever proved them wrong, subscribe. Let's hit the 10K likes. I want to see how many of us turn pain into strength. Rejection leaves scars, but the deepest wound, when the same people who excluded you demand your help, without ever saying sorry. How do you respond? Do you walk away, or do you rewrite the rules? The first cut. The first time you realize you don't belong isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a quiet moment, a glance exchanged between others, a laugh that stops when you walk into a room, a family gathering you weren't invited to until the last minute. You brush it off at first, thinking maybe it's just in your head, but then it happens again and again until one day you can't ignore it anymore. You're an outsider in your own story. For me, it was the little things. The way conversations shifted when I spoke, like my words didn't carry the same weight. The way decisions were made without me, as if my opinion was an afterthought. The way my achievements were met with a nod, while others got celebrations. It wasn't hatred. It was something worse. Indifference, like I was a guest who'd overstayed my welcome. And the hardest part? There was no big fight, no clear reason, just the unshakable feeling that I was different. And different wasn't good enough. I tried to fix it, of course. I molded myself into what I thought they wanted. Quieter, smaller, less me. But no matter how much I changed, the message stayed the same. You don't fit here. And that's when I learned the first brutal truth. Some people will never see you as family, no matter how much blood you share. You could spend your whole life cutting pieces off yourself to make them comfortable, and they'd still find a reason to keep you at arm's length. So I stopped trying, not out of anger, but survival. Because the real damage wasn't their rejection. It was what I started to believe about myself. That I was unworthy, unlovable, broken in some invisible way. But here's what they didn't realize. When you push someone out, you also set them free. Free to find their own people. Free to define their own worth. Free to build something stronger than the fragile belonging they denied you. And that's the irony, isn't it? The ones who made you feel like you didn't belong were the ones who lost a right to have you. The first cut hurts the most, but it's also the one that teaches you the most important lesson. You don't have to bleed forever for people who never cared if you were whole. The silent treatment. Silence can be louder than words. It's not just the absence of sound. It's the presence of absence, the deliberate emptiness where connection should be. I learned this lesson in the pauses between sentences meant for others, in the invitations that never came, in the way my voice seemed to evaporate in rooms full of people who shared my last name. They didn't shout me down or argue me into submission. They simply didn't hear me. Conversations would flow around me like water around a stone, effortless and uninterrupted, as if I wasn't there at all. The cruelest part wasn't the exclusion. It was how normal it felt to them, how natural it was for them to plan holidays without checking if I was free, to have inside jokes I wasn't part of, to forget my birthday year after year while remembering everyone else's. At first, I thought maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe this was just how families were. But then I noticed a pattern. The way their eyes would slide past mine in group photos, how my achievements were met with polite nods while others got celebrations, how my struggles were minimized with a quick, you'll figure out, while they rallied around each other for far smaller problems. The message was clear. My presence was tolerated, but my absence wouldn't be noticed. I became an expert in reading the subtleties of their silence. The particular way a text message could sit unanswered for days, the specific tone of, "we didn't think you'd be interested," that really meant we didn't think of you at all. What makes this kind of rejection so devastating is that it leaves no scars to point to, no evidence to prove your pain is real. When someone shouts at you, at least they're acknowledging your existence. But silence makes you question your own reality. It makes you wonder if you're imagining the hurt, if you're the problem for noticing what everyone else seems fine with. Eventually, I stopped trying to break through it. Not because I gave up, but because I realized their silence wasn't about my worth. It was about their limitations. Some people don't know how to love loudly, and no amount of begging will teach them. The greatest power came when I learned to stop listening for their approval and started hearing my own voice instead. Their silence, which once made me feel invisible, became the blank space where I could finally write my own story. The turning point. There comes a moment when the weight of rejection becomes lighter than the burden of pretending. For me, it didn't happen in some dramatic confrontation or tearful breakdown. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, standing in my tiny apartment kitchen, when I suddenly realized I was tired. Not just sleepy tired, but soul tired. Tired of rearranging myself to fit spaces that were never meant for me. Tired of waiting for approval that would never come. Tired of treating my own life like a waiting room for their acceptance. That's when something shifted. Not in them, in me. I looked around at the life I'd built despite them, not because of them, and understood a fundamental truth. I didn't need their table when I could build my own. And more importantly, I deserved to sit at it without apology. This awakening didn't come with fireworks. It came with practical, daily rebellions. Saying no without explanation for the first time. Spending holidays with friends who actually wanted me there. Investing in relationships where I wasn't constantly auditioning for a role. Each small act of self-respect was a brick in the foundation of my new reality. I began to notice how much energy I'd wasted trying to decode their mixed signals, how many opportunities I'd missed while waiting for their validation. The turning point wasn't about them changing. It was about me realizing they didn't have to. Their opinion stopped being my compass. Their approval stopped being my oxygen. Their presence in my life became a choice, not an obligation. What surprises most people about this transformation is that it wasn't fueled by anger, but by clarity. Anger burns hot and fast, but clarity gives you steady, lasting power. I saw our relationship for what it was. Not some unchangeable bond, but a connection that only existed if both sides maintained it. And I had been the only one maintaining it for years. The real freedom came when I understood that walking away wasn't failure. It was the ultimate act of self-respect, not with slamming doors, but with quiet dignity. Not to punish them, but to preserve myself. That Tuesday afternoon in my kitchen marked the day I stopped waiting for them to see my worth and started acting like I saw it myself. And that made all the difference. The grind. The most powerful transformations happen in the unseen hours. Those lonely stretches between midnight and dawn when the world sleeps, but your determination burns brightest. This was my reality after the turning point. Every no they'd given me became fuel. Every dismissive comment transformed into motivation. I stopped viewing my differences as flaws and started recognizing them as advantages. The very qualities that made me unsuitable for their small world were exactly what I needed to conquer a bigger one. The grind wasn't glamorous. It looked like exhausted eyes scanning textbooks after double shifts, hands shaking from too much coffee. Bank accounts stretched thin from investing in certifications they said were a waste of time. It sounded like declined invitations to family gatherings so I could study, and the deafening silence when no one noticed my absence. But here's what they never understood. When you've been starved of validation your whole life, you develop a different kind of hunger, not for their approval, but for something far more sustaining, your own respect. I measured progress in unconventional ways, not just promotions or paychecks, but in the growing quiet confidence that replaced my need for external validation. The first time I negotiated a salary without apologizing for my worth. The moment I stopped anxiously waiting for replies and let my work speak for itself. The gradual realization that my opinion carried weight in rooms where it actually mattered. This grind was about more than career success. It was a daily practice of trusting myself after years of being told I shouldn't. Every small victory chipped away at their narrative. Not because I needed to prove them wrong, but because I finally believed I could be right. The late nights weren't about revenge. They were about redemption. Not the kind where someone declares you worthy, but the kind you grant yourself through consistent action. What made this grind different from all my previous efforts was the absence of an audience. Before, I'd worked hard hoping they'd notice. Now, I worked for the quiet satisfaction of meeting my own standards. Their indifference, which once crushed me, became an unexpected gift. It forced me to develop intrinsic motivation so strong that their eventual attention couldn't shake it. The grind taught me that real power isn't in their recognition, but in your own relentless commitment to becoming. Not better than them, just fully yourself. And that kind of transformation doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens in the grind, those sacred, solitary moments between who you were and who you're becoming. The first win, that first undeniable victory, hits differently when you spend a lifetime being underestimated. It wasn't the award or promotion itself that mattered. It was a seismic shift in how the world suddenly saw me and, more importantly, how I saw myself. After years of being the invisible one, the overlooked, the not quite good enough, success became more than an achievement. It was a reclamation. The moment my name was called, something cracked open inside me. Not just pride, but profound validation of what I'd known all along. My worth wasn't determined by their inability to see it. What made this victory so sweet wasn't the applause. It was the quiet before it. The way the room seemed to hold its breath when my accomplishments were announced. The subtle double takes from people who'd never given me a second glance. Their surprise was my triumph. Not because I wanted to shame them, but because their shock proved how little they'd ever truly seen me. I hadn't just exceeded expectations. I'd shattered the narrow box they'd tried to keep me in. And as I stood there, absorbing the moment, I realized something powerful. Their approval was no longer prize. My own belief in myself was. This first win changed everything. Not because it made them respect me, some never would, but because it broke the last chains of self-doubt. The late nights, the sacrifices, the relentless grind had all led here. To undeniable proof that I was always capable, even when they insisted I wasn't. Their reluctant congratulations tasted different now. Not like validation, but like vindication. Not that I needed it anymore. The true victory wasn't in their changed behavior, but in my unchanged determination to keep rising regardless of their reaction. That first one wasn't the finish line. It was a starting point of a new understanding. My potential had been real all along. They just hadn't been looking, and now they couldn't look away. The most beautiful part? This success wasn't fueled by bitterness, but by something far more powerful. The quiet certainty that I deserved more than they'd ever been willing to give. That first win wasn't just about achievement. It was about awakening. The moment I realized the only person who needed to believe in me was myself. And that realization made every struggle, every dismissal, every moment of doubt worth it. Not because I proved them wrong, but because I proved myself right. The phone call, the ringtone that shattered years of silence wasn't just unexpected. It was ironic in ways that would be poetic if they didn't hurt so much. After all the ignored birthdays, the unreturned messages, the casual exclusion, now suddenly my phone lit up with their name. Not with an apology or explanation, but with those loaded words, "We need your help." The weight of that moment crushed me more than I expected. Not because they'd reached out, but because they'd skipped every step of reconciliation and gone straight to transaction. No, how have you been? No, we miss you. Just straight to what I could do for them. That call held up a mirror to our entire relationship. They only saw my value when it became useful to them. What surprised me most wasn't their audacity. It was my own calm. The old me would have jumped at the chance to finally be needed. The new me recognized the painful truth. This wasn't about rebuilding bridges. It was about convenient crossings. I let the phone ring a few extra seconds, not out of hesitation, but to savor the strange power of that moment. The tables had turned completely. The person they'd treated as an afterthought was now their first call in a crisis. The one they claimed wouldn't understand was suddenly the only one who could solve their problem. There was no satisfaction in it, just profound sadness at how predictable it all was. That call became the ultimate test of everything I'd learned. Not about whether I would help them. That was my choice to make. But about whether I'd fall back into old patterns of seeking approval through usefulness. The most important realization came as I listened to their panicked explanation. Their need didn't erase my worth, and my compassion wouldn't rewrite our history. This phone call wasn't a new chapter. It was just a footnote proving what I'd known all along. My value had existed even when they refused to see it, and would remain whether or not I answered that call. The ringing phone wasn't really about them needing me. It was about me finally understanding I didn't need them to need me. The choice. Standing at the crossroads between compassion and self-respect, I discovered a third path they never taught me about, one where boundaries and kindness could coexist. Saying yes didn't have to mean erasing the past, and saying no didn't require burning bridges. The power was in the pause, that sacred space between their request and my response where I finally held all the cards. I realized helping them wasn't about earning love or proving worth. It was simply an option, one I could consider without obligation or guilt. This wasn't the desperate scramble for approval I once knew. It was a conscious decision made from strength, not fear. The old pattern screamed at me to either martyr myself or punish them, but growth whispered a better way. I could assist on my terms, with clear eyes and an open heart, without pretending history didn't happen. What made this choice revolutionary wasn't the action itself, but the mindset behind it. I wasn't their savior or their doormat, just a capable person deciding whether to extend help, with full awareness of our complicated past. Setting terms became an act of self-love, not revenge. I'll help, but not indefinitely, or I can advise, but you'll need to handle the execution. These weren't punishments, but protections for the peace I'd worked so hard to build. The most surprising part? How light it felt. Not the performative lightness of pretending everything was fine, but the genuine weightlessness that comes when you stop letting old wounds dictate present decisions. This choice became the ultimate test of everything I'd learned, that my value wasn't transactional, that love shouldn't come with conditions, and that sometimes the bravest thing isn't walking away or staying trapped, but rewriting the rules entirely. In that defining moment, I discovered profound truth. Real power isn't in making them regret how they treated you. It's in reaching a place where their past behavior no longer controls your present choices. The question stopped being, do they deserve my help? And became, does helping align with who I am today? That subtle shift changed everything. Not because they'd changed, but because I had. And that made all the difference. The new rules. The moment I established boundaries was the moment our relationship transformed. Not because they suddenly respected me, but because I stopped waiting for them to. These weren't arbitrary lines drawn in anger. They were the natural consequence of years spent swallowing my worth to accommodate their comfort. The rules were simple. I would no longer shrink to fit spaces that never welcomed me. I would no longer prioritize people who treated me as an option. I would no longer confuse blood with respect or history with obligation. The shift wasn't announced, it was demonstrated. In how I spent my time, in what I tolerated, in the unshakable calm with which I said, this no longer works for me, without apology or aggression. What surprised me most wasn't their resistance. It was their reluctant adaptation. People who had ignored me for years suddenly found a way to mind their words, to show up, to engage on terms that acknowledged my humanity. Not because they had a change of heart, but because they finally understood access to me was now a privilege, not a given. The power wasn't in punishing them. It was in the quiet consistency of my standards. No drama, no ultimatums, just a steady application of self-respect. And here's the truth they don't tell you. Boundaries don't always fix broken relationships. Sometimes, they reveal which ones were never real to begin with. But for those willing to meet me in this new space, something unexpected emerged. A healthier dynamic, one built not on obligation, but on mutual choice. The rules weren't about control. They were about self-preservation. And in that preservation, I found something far more valuable than their approval, my own peace. The kind that comes when you stop negotiating your worth with people who never saw it in the first place. The rules didn't push people away. They simply ensured those who stayed knew how to treat me. And that made all the difference. The aftermath. The dust settled differently than I expected. There were no grand apologies. No dramatic reconciliations, just a quiet understanding that some relationships evolve into something smaller, yet more honest. They still don't fully get me, and that's okay. The difference now? I no longer twist myself into knots trying to explain. Their limited perception isn't my responsibility to fix. What changed wasn't their behavior. It was my expectation that they ever would. The aftermath wasn't about them seeing the light. It was about me no longer living in their darkness. I watched as they cycled through the stages of adjustment. Confusion at my boundaries, frustration at my unavailability, then reluctant acceptance when they realized I wouldn't budge. The dynamic shifted in subtle ways. Conversations grew shorter but more meaningful. Interactions became less frequent but more genuine. The space between us, once filled with my desperate efforts to connect, now held something better. Mutual respect, earned not through obligation, but through consistent action. The greatest revelation? Letting go of the fantasy that they'd someday become who I needed freed me to appreciate who they actually were. Flawed, limited people doing their best with their own unresolved wounds. I stopped taking their limitations personally. The aftermath wasn't victory or defeat. It was liberation, not from them, but from the version of me that believed their approval defined my worth. The relationship that once drained me now occupies only the space I choose to give it. And in that space, I found something unexpected. Not the love I'd begged for, but the peace I'd always deserved. The lesson, the most valuable wisdom, often comes wrapped in hardship. What began as rejection transformed into my greatest teacher, showing me that belonging isn't about being accepted by others, but about accepting yourself first. Their inability to see your worth says nothing about your value and everything about their vision. The people who make you feel like you don't belong are actually doing you a favor. They're clearing space for those who will. This journey taught me that respect isn't demanded. It's demonstrated through how you treat yourself when nobody's watching. The moment you stop seeking validation is the moment you become truly free. Painful as it was, their exclusion became my unexpected advantage. It forced me to develop strengths I wouldn't have discovered otherwise. Resilience, independence, the courage to stand alone. Their rejection wasn't a blockade. It was a detour leading me to better destinations. Now I understand. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time, not with bitterness, but with clarity. The greatest power lies not in changing their minds, but in outgrowing the need for their approval. This lesson transcends family. It applies to every area of life. Your tribe isn't determined by blood, but by those who celebrate your presence rather than tolerate it. The closure you seek won't come from their apology, but from your own realization that you were never the problem. True belonging begins within. What they called not one of us was actually too much for us, too strong, too bright, too authentic. And that's the most valuable lesson of all. When you're rejected by those operating from lack, you're being redirected toward abundance. Your worth was never theirs to define, only yours to live. The day I walked into that hospital/bank/courtroom, pick one, I didn't see family. I saw people who'd underestimated me. And for the first time, I held all the power. This isn't about winning or losing. It's about realizing that the people who made you feel small were never the ones who got to define you. You don't owe them anger. You don't owe them gratitude. You owe yourself the truth. You were always enough. They just couldn't see it. And now, they can't look away. The hardest part isn't the rejection. It's the moment you stop needing them to change or you'd be at peace. So help them if you choose. Walk away if you must. But never forget, you built what they couldn't break. And that's the real victory. Drop a fire in the comments if you've been the unwanted who became the unstoppable. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Your story isn't over yet. Funny how the ones who said you didn't belong now can't survive without you.